Doge was not ever taken seriously. It was not real, and they weren't ever going to actually cut anything real. And so all they did was cut some ideological stuff for chump change and made no real impact on actual spending. And again, it was only supposed to last a year, and it only lasted 4 months. They cut both the leaders by the first 4 months. It's a failure on every front. And at least Elon is stepping up. Because, a few days ago he said,
it's not like I agree with everything the administration does. So it's like, we have differences of opinion. I don't want to, speak up against the administration, but I don't want to, or also don't want to take responsibility for everything the administration is doing. It's not like...
What a change of heart, dude, from just a few months ago. So I thought this was what he was going to do. I thought this was his position. I thought he was going to be like kind of slinking off into the sunset and like licking his wounds and going back to the companies and not talking shit on anything. But after this, I guess he changed his mind, had some ketamine, woke the fuck up and spoke out and said, yeah, this bill sucks. So at least respect that, because I thought he was going to do this. I thought this was going to be his... This is only like a day or two before. We'll see what the long-term repercussions are. I wonder how Trump will respond when asked about it by tomorrow. My greatest hope is that somehow this Elon thing breaks the support for the bill and it doesn't make it to the Senate and it gets stopped. That would be awesome. What do you think Scott Bessent's stance on the big beautiful bill are? Almost everybody who worked with Scott Bessent prior to him joining the Trump administration says really good things about him. He's a very smart guy. I've listened to his speeches before he was part of this administration. Very smart guy. Why we have to get spending under control. Clearly articulated paths for America to do that. In the administration, he has really just repeated what Trump says verbatim. Now, I don't know if that's what you have to do to get any influence in there, but it's hard to know what he's thinking. Because all he does is try it out on TV and say exactly what the party line is. Now, my understanding is that he, behind the scenes, has done some things to walk back the tariffs, has done some things to reduce some of the most insane chaos, has done some things to try and calm the bond market so that we don't have a banking crisis. But he also might have punched Elon in the face, which is pretty cool. But I really can't give a thumbs up or thumbs down to Scott Bessent so far until something happens. And right now, again, I'm thinking of one of these finance substacks I was reading, but he was like, listen, I've worked with Scott Bessent. He's a smart guy, but right now it looks like he's driving the country towards a cliff. And Scott Bessent, again, is one of the people that'll walk out and be like, well, this bill is going to reduce the deficit. And it's like, it's just not. Wasn't it better with two options? Yes, I not like it mattered. It wasn't like Trump was listening to my stream. But I campaigned a bit for Scott Bessent because the other option was Howard Lutnick, who is a used car salesman level of grift and stupid. How can your message of reducing spending be marketable for political normies? How would you convince people that reducing spending is the biggest light items, is the good thing going into specifics? Yeah, I've been thinking about this. This is my main argument. Let me see if I can make it real simple. So we know that the main things that the government spends money on are Medicare, Medicaid, basically healthcare for old people and poor people, Social Security, which is money for old people, military, interest payments, and one more thing, subscriptions! Subscriptions make up 85% of the government budget. That's why we need Rocket Money. Thank you to Rocket Money for sponsoring this clip. Rocket Money. There's a new good work. I was going to watch that with you guys. It's called Why Are We in a Trade War? Let's watch it.
Citizens of the world, we are at war. I know. And it's the most brutal kind of war. Money war. That's right, folks. Over the past few weeks, financial markets have been in a tornado of turbulence after the US of A fired off hot new rules from our trade policy cannons that have completely turned the globe upside down. And if you're wondering why it was absolutely necessary for us to unleash this economic hellfire onto the world, the answer is, I do not know.
Nobody fucking knows. Nobody knows. There's 7 different answers from 7 different people.
Before 2 weeks ago, I thought tariff was nothing more than the name of my estranged roommate. Anytime, buddy. We still love you. But nope. According to Investopedia, a tariff is a tax that one country imposes on goods and services that it imports from another country. By making imports more expensive, countries can use tariffs to achieve certain strategic goals. Getting a trade partner to behave in a certain way, creating a competitive economic advantage for yourself, or balancing your budget. Perhaps most importantly, though, a tariff is something that makes my president and commander-in-chief Donald J. Trump absolutely sprung.
Yep.
I always say tariffs is the most beautiful word to me in the dictionary. And I was reprimanded by the fake news. They said, what about love, religion, and God? I said, I agree. Let's put God number 1, religion number 2, love, I don't know. I got to put that number 3, I guess, right? And then it's tariff.
Up until this Trump administration, tariffs between...
He's funny. He's funny, bro. He's got jokes. I wish he didn't have any power. He didn't have any power, bro. He's
between the
funny.
U.S. and other
That's
nations
our guy, all
were
right.
pretty low. I mean, you know as well as me, the effective average tariff on imports coming into the U.S. was 2.5% as of last year. But this year, after a couple of months of foreplay, President Trump's love for...
You watch good work. What's the point of the Cybertruck?
The Tesla Cybertruck. This roughly 60...
You watch good work. What's the point of the Cybertruck?
The Tesla Cybertruck. This roughly 6,500-pound stainless steel missile that was conceived when Elon Musk fucked a dishwasher has become a cultural lightning rod. Conservatives love it, libs hate it, but good God is it great for content.
The Tesla Cybertruck.
Cybertruck.
Oh, here it is. Here it is.
Do I have a lot of thoughts?
Already
A disaster.
You gotta admit that's a fun thing to drive.
Yeah, it's definitely faster than it needs to be.
We're gonna shoot the Cybertruck, so we're gonna open fire on the Cybertruck. That looks hilarious.
Today, I investigate the hubbub encircling this big baby.
There's so many fucking Cybertrucks in LA, it's insane. It must be the most Cybertrucks per capita of any city in the world. It must be. I see one all the time. Miami, maybe Miami. I don't think Austin, bro.
Is there more to this angular whip than simply being a tank for people who are too big of pussies to join the military? Let's find out.
I feel like Miami's because it's the crypto capital of America, and you got to figure every crypto bro's got a Cybertruck.
It's impossible to know what city actually has the most Cybertrucks, but some data shows that Los Angeles had the most pre-orders when it was announced in 2019. And if Google Trends is any indication, California is the state with the highest search volume for the Cybertruck. So it seems likely that LA does have the most.
Elon Musk first unveiled the concept Cybertruck back in 2019 at a Matrix cosplay event for lonely single men who know what Y Combinator is. It was here that he asked one of his fake steampunk executive assistants to demonstrate the vehicle's indestructibility.
Franz, could you try to break this glass, please?
Sure?
Yeah,
So it seems likely.
please.
Sure?
Yeah. Oh my fucking god. Well, maybe that was a little too hard.
Such a great scene.
Elon, however, has never been one to let public embarrassment dissuade him from risking further public embarrassment, so he persisted. In true Tesla fashion, there were years of development, long production delays, and major recalls, including when the rear-view camera, which is the only way to see out of the back of the car, potentially didn't work in 27,000 vehicles. But after all that, late last year, the first Tesla Cybertruck started bumbling through our streets, leaving many onlookers with the same question: why?
The glib answer is that Elon Musk thought it would be cool. I don't really see a really strong marketing or strategic
Jack Ewing?
reason for the Cybertruck.
I think the point of the Cybertruck is that Elon Musk wanted to make it. It's difficult to look at it
Long
and
lost
come up with a clear business case for building that vehicle.
It's a good question. If only I could see inside Elon's mind, I would have the right answer.
These here fellas have all done a lot of reporting on electric vehicles, and together we would form an absolutely dominant high school Model UN team. When I asked them to make the case for this roughly $100,000, 19-foot-long death-shaped wheelie boat, they all gave me variations of around the same answer. Your boy wanted to do something crazy.
Tesla is a company that has sort of prided itself on not doing things the same way as other car makers.
It's not really a work environment. It's not very practical for a tradesperson. This is for somebody who lives in the suburbs, makes quite a lot of money. And you could argue with sort of a halo vehicle, one of those vehicles that not that many people buy, but that attracts people to the brand. Maybe you could say that it makes Tesla look like the cutting-edge car company that's doing things nobody else does. So I really think it's just something that Elon Musk thought would be cool.
The thing is, despite its apparent lack of traditional strategy, the Cybertruck is really starting to do numbers for Tesla and its loud flesh mascot.
He was correct in building a toy for the fanboys who love him because there's a lot of them, and they've come out to buy it.
Tesla says the recent success of the Cybertruck has made the vehicle profitable. It's also helped Tesla reverse a 2-quarter sales decline. But just like when I win slam dunk contests, context is important here. Those dunk contests are conducted on a 7-foot rim against my cousins who are in elementary school, and I have drugged them. While the Cybertruck was the third best selling overall EV model in Q3, it was still tens of thousands of units away from the top selling models, Tesla's Model 3 and Model Y, which have dominated the market for years. Some experts think that the time Tesla spent building Elon's dream truck was a waste of an opportunity to develop a new, cheaper model that would appeal more to the general public to firm up Tesla's lead in the increased...
This would be good to have in America, like a giant turret on the front of your armored car. That way nobody cuts me off in LA traffic. I would feel safer with one of these. In fact, I feel unsafe not having it. Or like, what if a liberal asked me for money? Do you know what I'm saying? I just would feel unsafe. What if Joe Biden approached me with his hand out for more of my tax dollars? I'm gonna need a tough vehicle.
And to compete with the much cheaper EVs being produced internationally, especially by China's BYD. Plus, lots of Cybertruck sales so far have been fulfilling years of pre-orders. It remains to be seen how many new customers Tesla will be able to capture.
What if a woman with blue hair existed in the world? I'd need 6 layers of armor. What am I gonna do? I won't be able to. It's gonna pierce the very fabric of my being.
Now, all that yammering aside, these moderately positive sales numbers do beg the question: is the Cybertruck maybe actually a good car?
When we first saw this thing debut, if you look at the response from seasoned car journalists, it's impossible to build a truck that looks like this, that passes all of safety regulations, that is manufacturable. So for him to actually do it, I think is impressive.
After David here posted a somewhat positive review of the Cybertruck to his car culture website, The Autopian, he faced a wave of backlash like he'd never before experienced in his career.
I actually kind of like the Cybertruck. The biggest sin that there is in the car world is boringness, and the Cybertruck does not commit that sin. My review basically stated that it's a compromised truck, and despite that, it's still cool, which seemed like a really lukewarm take to me.
Sure.
I got it from all sides. You know, people who hate Elon and think that I'm supporting him by saying the truck is cool. People who love Elon, who are, I mean, you really can't say anything negative about him or any product, or they will jump down to it. That whole
Sure thing, Daddy-O. But at this point, I had had enough of all the jibber-jabber. It was time for me to get my hands on this polarizing puppy dog, take it out on the road, and see what all the fuss was about.
And here we have it, the Cybertruck in the flesh. Now, folks, what you're getting here is truly a massive vehicle. It's incredibly shiny. You want to see me pop the front? You want to watch me pop the front?
Oh shit.
All of this extra space to bury your enemies.
As I embarked on my cyber trip, I had to admit that while there were some obvious flaws,
I truthfully cannot overstate how sharp the front of this vehicle is. There's just a layer of sharp around everything. I cannot see anything that's immediately in front of my nose. This car is ideal for hitting a small child in this area.
Yeah, exactly.
There is a rear view mirror.
There's a YouTuber.
rendered. I also found parts of the Cybertruck experience to be pretty nifty.
Right now I haven't been flipped off. The feel of driving this car does not match how it looks at all. I feel like I'm driving a pretty swift SUV. So how have you felt this passenger?
I will say it's very easy to get distracted inside this car.
There are many things to distract you. I mean, they have their own built-in karaoke system.
In fact, the goofy joys of the Cybertruck felt much more like playing with a...
But Elon is so fixated on this idea that you don't understand. This is going to be the biggest company ever. I would rather commit seppuku than fail.
Elon Musk was once seen as a visionary, a bold disruptor shaping the future of technology and human existence. But as his influence has grown, so too has a darker, more troubling side of his persona. What many first took as eccentric confidence has since been revealed as rampant egomania. Fez Siddiqui is a former colleague of mine at the Washington Post, and he's the author of a new book called Hubris Maximus, The Shattering of Elon Musk. He's joining me today to break down exactly how Musk's narcissism has evolved and the key moments that reveal just how deeply his self-obsession has shaped his career and the future that he claims to build. Fez, welcome to Power User.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
So I feel like we all know that Elon Musk is obsessed with himself, but it seems like he's gotten more and more obsessed with himself over the years. You just wrote this book that really charts his business journey and kind of his leadership style over time, which I think is informed by this egoism, I guess. When you look back at Elon Musk's career, when did you first start to see the inkling of this kind of egomania?
So I write in the book, around 2013, a Tesla official asks Musk about this ambition of his to go to Mars. And the question on the official's mind is, humanity is going to become so much more advanced in coming decades, coming centuries or millennia. Why do we need to go to Mars right now? And what this official quickly learns is that it's not about the necessity to go to Mars right now. Musk wants to be the one to take us there. And that's a really revelatory moment into Elon Musk's mindset.
Got it. So it's not like he's obsessed with going to Mars because he thinks this is humanity's future, and 2013 they developed some sort of amazing technology that was going to make it possible for the first time or anything. It's really about him being the one to go down in history as colonizing Mars.
Absolutely. And there can be a little bit of both. The ambition can be worthwhile, but Musk needs to be the one to help humanity achieve the goal.
It seems like he centers himself a lot, obviously, in his own companies. Like, he has to be the CEO of every company, it seems like, that he's involved with. But then there's also, like, these other somewhat smaller events. I'm thinking of 2018 with the Thai boys in caves. Can you explain what happened there?
Obviously, there's this horrific instance of these boys becoming trapped in this cave in Thailand, and nobody at that moment is looking to Elon Musk, who heads a rocket company and who heads an electric vehicle company, to save these boys. It's really Musk inserting himself into the conversation and offering up a solution that nobody was really asking for.
And what was the solution that he was proposing?
The solution he was proposing in this case was a kid-sized submarine designed by those who work for his companies. And this was a rescue that was very meticulous through a lot of tight spaces, extremely dangerous, treacherous, required trained divers and experts.
Yeah, it seems nonsensical. And it seems like a way to also kind of flex his technical prowess, right? He sort of wanted to show people that he is this like technical genius, right? That could solve these tough problems.
And Musk's frustration at not being acknowledged to be the genius sort of manifests in Musk lashing out at somebody who's actually involved in the rescue and baselessly smearing that person as a pedo guy. When Musk's crew ultimately arrives in Thailand and is not useful to the mission, that's when you see Musk start to get really agitated and smear this man.
I mean, this is when I certainly started to notice him losing it a little bit and being a little bit crazy online. Like, it seems like he was getting more addicted to Twitter and that validation cycle and kind of needing validation, not just seemingly from his work endeavors, but also through like the public seeing him as this savior. And he was very publicly not seen as a savior in that situation. Just a couple years later, the COVID pandemic hits, and I feel like you see Elon again try to center himself very quickly, right?
Before coronavirus had become widespread in the United States, Musk started commentating on it. He started to express beliefs. He indicates that he thinks COVID cases will be at or near zero by April, that kids are basically immune, all kinds of unscientific thoughts. And then he gives one of these trademark offers. Musk told people that Tesla was willing to build ventilators, which was a very massive need at the time. And so Tesla would leverage its manufacturing expertise to build ventilators.
Did Tesla actually have any experience in building ventilators or even have the necessary equipment to do that type of thing?
Tesla was not a medical device company, and what they deliver ultimately falls far short of the need.
Who did they even deliver these ventilators to?
Tesla ultimately built a prototype of a ventilator, which was never put into medical use. And what Musk delivered to hospitals were CPAP and BiPAP machines, sleep apnea devices, which were a part of the needs during the height of the coronavirus. is being done.
So it seems like this is another time where, again, Elon Musk has these sort of visions of grandeur, right? He thinks that he can come in and save the day. He doesn't have a lot of respect for people who actually have knowledge and authority in certain places. It sounds like this is the story of himself with so many companies. I think he wrote in the book in 2021, Elon Musk calls himself the techno king of Tesla instead of CEO, and he did it on some certain date.
He did this on March 15th, the Ides of March, which anyone familiar with Julius Caesar knows as a doomed date. He was not content to have a title that was like an NPC title. This is a big theme for Elon. He does not want to be sort of this generic character, the non-player character, so he's the techno king. He's not the CEO.
He wants to be the star. It's not even like he wants to be a supporting character, an NPC, or a side character. It's like he has to be the main character in all of his things. And there's a hubris to it. I mean, you write a lot about, obviously, the takeover of Twitter, and so much of what you're saying of these previous events ultimately show his strategy in Twitter. There's this famous tweet that's like, Elon Musk is going to basically realize over and over again by making mistakes that the original owners of Twitter weren't like evil, woke people that were censoring everyone, but everything that they did was for a good business reason. And I feel like that's what we've seen, right? He takes over the company, he tries to roll back all of these things, content moderation, whatever, and now he's in the business of content moderating, right? He's doing a lot of the things that he lambasted Twitter executives for doing just a couple years ago.
And if you look at the blunder that ultimately led Musk to have to step aside as head of Twitter, he limited sharing of outside content on the platform, which just flies in the face of what Twitter was about, which was an information sharing platform. This idea that you're going to ban people from sharing links to their Instagrams, Twitter users were not having it. But this is an instance of Musk overruling the guiding philosophy of the platform and deciding that he knows what's best.
Shortly after he took over Twitter, he also insisted on himself being inserted into the feed more, right? Like it became, I feel like, an Elon feed where suddenly engineers were being forced to manually put his tweets into people's feeds, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't want to call it hubris or megalomania or a hero complex or a god complex, call it main character syndrome. And Musk was going to make himself the main character whether you liked it or not.
I feel like you see this with so many Silicon Valley billionaires, and when you look at the landscape of Silicon Valley, it's full of so many main characters, each kind of in their own little fiefdoms. We've seen an explosion of interest in AI, especially since OpenAI released ChatGPT in 2022 widely. And it seems like Sam Altman is undeniably the main character of AI, and that seems to bother Elon.
So it's unsurprising that Grok hits the scene shortly after this. I write about in the book about how Elon launches autonomy in Teslas and this big bet on full self-driving shortly after the ride-hailing companies embrace autonomy as part of their IPO ambitions. And you see the same pattern with AI. The large language models hit the scene, and then in the snap of a finger you have Grok now hitting the scene. He can't handle not being the center of attention when there's a big tech bet that's in the news.
It's not even just him trying to be the center of the media cycle, which I totally agree. He is. Like, he wants to be at the forefront of every single hype cycle and be the main guy. But also, he has this kind of like God complex about AI, right?
So this idea of playing God is not entirely foreign to what Musk does. He's applied similar thinking to Tesla Autopilot, where he believes that at the moment where autonomy is safer, it's a moral imperative to roll it out. The science is not overwhelming that it's safer than human driving. Tesla has numbers that it trots out. So when Musk decides we're at that moment, he is taking on a godlike role in society because he's the person who has the tool and the unique ability to unleash it.
And then you also see him building these humanoid robots where it seems like he wants to kind of rule this army of robot humans.
Similar to Musk's thinking on AGI, he believes that an army of humanoid robots could go rogue and overpower humanity. So he's talked about when Tesla made this bet on building humanoid robots, he wants to build them to be nice and to be obedient and ultimately serve humanity rather than overpowering it. He specifically said it's a robot that you could take yourself as opposed to one that would dominate and ultimately destroy you.
I think that's very funny because if you're scared of a robot army going rogue, the first step in that disastrous series of events would be to build a robot army, which is now what he's doing, and being like, no, this one won't go rogue.
This is what Musk has managed to sell his investors on.
When we think more about him kind of centering himself, I think also of the most recent election and people saying President Elon and how he's kind of the shadow president. And it seems like not only did he want to be central to the election and claim that he was sort of responsible for the victory of Trump, and I think he probably was, at least in large part, right, given the amount of money and the way that he leveraged his platform to promote Trump messaging, but he also wants to have this crucial role in the administration, right? He sort of immediately sets himself up where he's not president, he can't be president, where you get this vibe where he's kind of once again trying to be the main guy.
Musk believes that society is hamstrung and strangled basically by regulations and by what he has called the woke mind virus. Again, you have to take him at his word here or accept that maybe he's trying to sell people on the idea that these things are getting in the way of humanity's ambitions, and he has to be the one to free humanity from that stranglehold.
Of course, that's really just about like getting tax breaks, right, and firing regulators for his own business.
Trump takes power and Musk assumes this godlike role. He can decide or ultimately delete entire agencies. So he can decide on the fortunes of entire agencies or delete them if he wishes. And Musk was the person who was Trump's largest donor, Republicans' largest donor. He was the person who made this possible. So how is that going to be rewarded other than with a massive amount of power that is unprecedented for an unelected official?
But it goes back to this like delusions of grandeur, right? It's hubris. It's I ran a car company successfully and a social network not successfully, and so I should be the one to come in and mandate all these changes in government.
Musk once again centers himself. He believes that he is uniquely equipped to carry out this wish of his of reigning in the federal government, and he doesn't need to have the relevant expertise, and that belief is egged on by hordes of investors and fans.
And obviously Elon has millions of followers and people that kind of hang on his every move. And I feel like even the media themselves kind of like fed his delusions for a really long time. What role do you think the public internet has played in building up these delusions of grandeur in Musk's head?
Whenever Musk needs to feel validated in a decision that might be unpopular everywhere else in society, the fans on X are backing him. And we saw this play out when Musk entered into government. Some of Doge's initial work was highly controversial and was frankly unrelated to the agenda of the Trump administration, regardless of how people might have felt about that agenda. And yet Musk was cheered as a hero and somebody with this unblemished business track record and somebody who, if anybody could rein in the government.
We need to talk about J.D. Vance.
Republican lead candidate J.D. Vance is igniting a firestorm for once calling citizens without children childless cat ladies.
Accused Europe of restricting free speech and endangering democracy.
Calling the Chinese peasants, and many of them are not pleased. Who is Vice President J.D. Vance?
He's a Marine. He's a dad. He's incredibly smart.
J.D. Vance is the future, period.
He comes wholly from this very, very obscure, eccentric, right-wing subculture of tech billionaires.
He's a very dangerous fake.
J.D. Vance is one of the most high-profile and controversial vice presidents in American history. He's become known for his dislike of Ukraine, for being the target of online memes and accusations about eyeliner, and for having a slightly odd vibe.
These guys are creepy and yes, just weird as hell. That's what you see.
Vance is also known for being a person who went from being anti-Trump,
I'm a never Trump guy. I never liked him,
to being a big supporter.
He's the best president of my lifetime, and he revealed the corruption in this country.
One result of this is that many have argued Vance is just a grifter without any real ideas, but I think this is a mistake. Certainly Vance is opportunistic and is hungry for power. He is a politician after all, but I think seeing Vance as merely a grifter underestimates how ideological he is.
We have to honestly and aggressively attack the universities in this country.
Fire every single mid-level bureaucrat, every civil servant in the administrative state, replace them with our people.
Vance has ideas and ideology. That's why calling him weird struck a chord. These ideas have grown out of a type of conservatism, often called the New Right, one that will, with Vance the frontrunner to succeed Trump, only become more important. These ideas are also built on several contradictions. And so, in this video, I don't just want to explain J.D. Vance's ideology, but also identify 3 problems that will lead these ideas, as well as the man himself, straight into disaster. Before we start, I want to talk about today's sponsor, Private Internet Access VPN. A VPN hides your IP address and safeguards your internet connection through an encrypted tunnel. This way, it shields your digital life from the eyes of those that are looking to exploit your private information. Another great reason to use a VPN is to watch streaming services in other regions. Let's say I want to watch The Death of Stalin, a hilarious portrait of the idiots promoted in a dictatorship. I don't know why I'm thinking about that subject. However, while the film is not available in the UK, looking online I can see it is available on Australian Netflix. Soon after connecting my VPN, I have the ability to watch the movie. This is the VPN I use, partly because it's proven in court that it doesn't log your activity. No records of IP address, browsing history, nothing. Right now there's a 93% discount for viewers of this channel, so it's just $2.03 per month. Plus you'll get 4 extra months free, all with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Check out the link below, piavpn.com/Brendan Miller. Thank you to Private Internet Access VPN for sponsoring this video.
JD Vance, welcome to the News Hour.
JD Vance first appeared on the scene in 2016 with the publication of Hillbilly Elegy, which tells Vance's story of growing up in poverty in Midtown Ohio. But Vance also attracted attention because he seemed to be able to help explain the white working class voters that had been attracted to Donald Trump.
Do they want tangibly to come out of this election?
Well, I think that tangibly what they want is fundamentally a change of direction.
As Trump's presidency progressed, Vance continued to appear a bit on TV, but kind of faded from the scene.
Are you a racist?
Then, in 2021, he was back, running for a Senate seat in Ohio.
You have elites in the ruling class that have plundered this country, that have made it harder for middle-class Americans to live a normal life.
It was quite the change. Vance had gone from being this sort of polite, softly spoken, literary writer to being a Trump-supporting populist, now with a beard. New Vance won the Senate race, and in July 2024 he was picked as Trump's VP. By now he had a wide agenda, an economic policy based on tariffs and an isolationist foreign policy. But in this video I want to focus on a different aspect of his thinking, something that connects old Vance and new Vance, and that explains a lot about his beliefs and actions. I'm talking about culture.
We have lost big business, we've lost finance, we've lost the culture, we've lost the academy. But I'd be honest with you, the culture war that we fight in this country, I worry that many conservatives underappreciate the challenge that we face. The American political culture was like deeply diseased.
You can actually trace Vance's interest in culture back to his book, the full title of which is A Memoir of a Family and Culture in Crisis.
Homes are a chaotic mess. At least one member of the family uses drugs. We'll hit and punch each other. Sometimes we'll get a job, but it won't last. We'll get fired for tardiness or for stealing merchandise.
It was culture that was also key to Vance's explanation of Donald Trump's victory in 2016.
Folks who aren't necessarily economically destitute, but in some ways feel very culturally isolated and very pessimistic about the future.
Many heard Vance's focus on culture as just another conservative, unsympathetic appeal to individual responsibility. But in fact, Vance came to argue against this idea.
The way that conservatives, and I'm a conservative, talk about culture is in some ways an excuse to end a conversation instead of starting a much more important conversation. It's look at their bad culture, look at their deficient culture, we can't do anything to help them.
While the right just focused on individuals, the left also had a limited view, focusing just on government and structural solutions like economic opportunity, with culture, the norms, ideas and values that permeate everything, getting missed by both sides.
Yeah, the lefties think that the structure matters and consequently you got to focus on public policy. The righties think that personal agency matters and you've got to focus only on the individual choices that people make. I just think that most normal people recognize that the environment, the culture that you grow up in, the things that you see, the examples that you're exposed to, the sense of possibility that you acquire from observing the world around you, that's very important.
Now, all this isn't that unusual. There's a long history in American conservatism of worrying about culture. But, as we'll see, it's where Vance goes with these worries, which is such a dangerous and radical break with past conservative positions. To explain, we need to start with liberalism, a political ideology that centers around ideas of liberty and freedom. I'm not talking about liberals as in Democrats, left-wingers. I'm talking about philosophical liberalism that you can find supporters of on both the left and right, which is why, by the way, you can find liberals used as a name for both conservative and left-wing parties. One way to think about liberalism is two types of liberty, economic liberty and personal liberty. First, there's those that want what they call economic liberty, lower taxes, less regulation and so on, versus those who want a bigger role for the state in the economy, taxing and maybe even owning businesses. This is the traditional left-right divide. Then there's those who support personal liberty, whether that's religion, drugs, gender, whatever, against social conservatives who are more opposed. Here is where you'll find most Democrats, supporting personal liberty but wanting the state intervening in the economy. Up here would be people who are also left on economic policy but more socially conservative. Historically, this is quite a rare type of politics, but we'll come back to that. Here is where you'll traditionally find Republicans and Conservatives, and here, also on the right, you have Libertarians or Classical Liberals, who are against the state intervening in either the economic or personal sphere. An example of a Libertarian would be Peter Thiel, a tech entrepreneur and investor who's been a key figure in JD Vance's life, with Vance working for him after law school, and Thiel donating huge amounts to his campaign for Senate. Tech libertarians like Thiel make up one of the intellectual influences on the new right. And people like Elon Musk have been influential in Trump's administration. But what's interesting about Vance is that, despite his past links, his rise to power involved separating himself from libertarians. In fact, giving a speech in 2019 titled Beyond Libertarianism.
Libertarians are not heartless, and I don't mean to suggest that they are, but they are so uncomfortable with political power or so skeptical of whether political power can accomplish anything that they don't want to actually use it to solve or even to try to help address some of these problems.
His argument is that conservatives have been too influenced by economic liberalism, which has stopped them taking action on cultural problems.
If people are spending too much time addicted to devices that are designed to addict them, we can't just blame consumer choice. We live in an environment and in a culture that's shaped by our laws and public policy, and we can't hide from that fact anymore.
So Vance's worries about culture mean he's moved away from economic liberalism. But there's another way Vance has argued liberalism is damaging to culture.
One of the things that the hyper-liberal, hyper-atomized, hyper-libertarian approach has done is that it's led people to think of themselves as buyers and sellers, as economic agents, as purely individuals.
Vance is arguing that people need connection and solidarity, but that liberalism doesn't give people this.
People need to feel that they're members of families, they need to feel that they're members of communities, they need to feel that they're members of nation states, and what this hyper-atomized approach to living has done is I think it's denied people a sense of solidarity.
This skepticism of liberalism has become a key part of New Right thinking, thinkers known as the post-liberals leading the way.
There are many people who are anticipating my book as a call to have a constant and unceasing January 6th. Deneen favors regime change, violently overthrow the government. I don't want to violently overthrow the government. I want something far more revolutionary than that. I want to overthrow the Party of Progress.
This is Patrick Deneen, who came to prominence in 2018 with a book attacking liberalism that he followed up with the provocatively named Regime Change in 2024 with JD Vance attending the book launch. Part of Deneen's argument is that what liberals on the left call progress, many ordinary people see as disorder, a never-ending attack on the traditional ideas like family marriage that give people this sense of meaning and security. Now finally those people are saying, enough.
What this seems to be a sudden outburst of inexplicable populism, now we understand, is in fact an inchoate and somewhat inarticulate demand by those who at least are residually of the party of order, saying we need order in our lives. We need stability. We need balance.
In other words, people need connection and purpose, but liberalism is just everyone doing their own thing. This is bad in itself, but also, here's the next step, it leaves a vacuum into which enters new harmful ideology.
Call it critical race theory, call it wokeism or social progressivism. I don't care what word you put on it, but at the end of the day, the most powerful ideology among the leadership of this country is not Christianity or American political theology or Abraham Lincoln's political religion. It is wokeism. It is social progressivism. It's globalism.
Vance's dislike of wokeism isn't actually that surprising. He's a conservative after all. But what's interesting is that his critique comes back again and again to culture and the desire for meaning and unity.
If you don't have some shared historical symbol, some sense of a shared past, I think it's very impossible to have any shared future. And so I really do think that we have to stop this non-stop assault on American history. Tearing down statues of people from the past.
In fact, it's the lack of real meaning that leads progressives to focus on race and gender.
What it is sort of a value system to replace the fact that they're all fundamentally atheist or agnostic. They have no real value system. Their only value system is achieve in a very conventional way. And so the idea that somehow they're pursuing racial or gender equity is like the value system that gives their life meaning.
For Vance, this new value system is all-pervasive, and in that way it reflects another idea in the new right, the idea of the cathedral.
The cathedral is just a short way to say journalism plus academia, the intellectual institutions at the center of modern society, just as the church was the intellectual institution at the center.
Okay.
There's a lot of talk nowadays about bringing back American manufacturing.
You've got to bring manufacturing jobs back to America. It's a good thing.
But few people are talking about how exactly this is going to happen. Added to that, a lot of us are wrong about what the problems truly are and what it's really going to take to fix them. We've spent the past 50 years sending our production overseas, and it's not going to come back overnight. But we can bring it back, and in this video I'll explain how.
Jobs and factories will come roaring back.
Revitalize American manufacturing.
Rebuild American manufacturing.
The goal is to rebuild the manufacturing sector in America.
I remember as a kid growing up in the 80s and 90s, there was a huge push to buy American. Made in the USA was stamped on all sorts of things, and commercials like this ran on TV.
Ask for the Made in the USA label, because it does matter. To all of us. Better believe it matters to me. Ask for and buy Made in the USA.
These commercials were meant to encourage people to buy products made in the USA before buying products made overseas. This was at a time when jobs were being outsourced, which really started in the 1970s, but hit a fever pitch in the 1990s. But here's a question that I have for you. How much would you be willing to pay for the same product, but made in the USA? I'm talking about two things, two products held side by side with no difference other than where they're made. How much would you pay for that American product? Would you pay 5% more, 10% more, 20%, 50% more? Think about that for just a minute. Now, this is just not some theoretical exercise. Someone actually ran this experiment. There is a serial entrepreneur out there whose name is Ramon Van Meer. He was even on Shark Tank once.
Let's do it.
One of his companies is called Athena, and they manufacture filtered shower heads. His most popular shower head normally sells for around $129, and it's mostly manufactured in China and Vietnam. Now, when tariffs jumped earlier this year from 25% to 170%, they set about looking at the possibility of manufacturing in the US. So here's what they did. They located a US supplier that could make their product. But they found that the US-based suppliers are more expensive, which is not a surprise. And so in order to make a profit, they'd have to sell their made-in-USA version of the shower head for $239 as opposed to $129 for the product that they make overseas. So they decided to run an experiment to see what consumers would do when presented the two options. As small business owners, we've heard it 1,000 times. I'll gladly pay more to support American made. We wanted to believe it, so we put it to the test. So they launched a secret landing page, giving over 25,000 customers the chance to vote with their wallets. And the results were brutal. Not a single customer purchased the American-made version, and only 24 people even added it to their cart. The imported version sold hundreds of units during that time, proving that price, not patriotism, was the deciding factor as to whether or not someone would buy. So what does this experiment tell us about American manufacturing? Well, it highlights a few of the core challenges of reshoring production to the US. First is cost barriers. Domestic manufacturing is significantly more expensive due to things like labor costs, but also supply chain limitations and regulatory hurdles, among other things, which we'll talk about in just a moment. Then there is consumer behavior. While people say that they support American-made goods, most won't pay the premium when given the choice. So let me ask again, how much more would you pay for an American-made product? $239 is about 85% higher than $129. Based upon this experiment, 85% is clearly too high, but would you spend $219, which is about 51%, or $199 or $159, which is about 21%? Now, as we go down that scale and get closer and closer to parity, I'm sure that there are going to be some people who will buy an American-made product at a higher price point. But honestly, you know, and especially in this economy, most people would not pay more at all. And the price would have to be real close before most consumers would change their behavior and actually buy something that's American-made versus something that's cheaper and made overseas. So cost is definitely a factor, but when it comes to manufacturing overseas and manufacturing in China specifically, there are a lot of misconceptions that need to be cleared up. And some of us Americans are just uninformed about the facts. So we need to set the record straight and be honest about what our challenges really are and what we're up against. But before we get into that, I want to talk about this video's sponsor, Lectric E-Bikes. So their e-bikes are awesome. They just sent me their newest model, the XP4, and this thing is super fun to ride. And overseas manufacturing specifically, some of us are just dead wrong. So let's clear the air and talk about what's really going on. Now, one of the first assumptions that many people have is that the reason that the prices on goods coming in from Asia is lower is because of low wages. But it's so much deeper than that. And to illustrate exactly what I'm talking about, I want to play you this clip from an interview that Apple CEO Tim Cook did with Fortune magazine.
There's a confusion about China that, and let me at least give you my opinion. The popular conception is that companies come to China because of low labor cost. I'm not sure what part of China they go to, but the truth is China stopped being the low labor cost country many years ago. And that is not the reason to come to China from a supply point of view. The reason is because of the skill and the quantity of skill in one location and the type of skill it is.
It's sobering, isn't it? Now, it is true that wages in China are still lower than they are in the US, but they've been rising for decades. And it isn't really about wages anymore at all. It's about skills and expertise that are present there in China and just don't exist in the US in the numbers that we need. It goes even deeper than that though. About a year ago, I made a video about Craftsman Tools and their attempts to reshore tool manufacturing to the US from Asia. Long story short, it didn't go well. It was a failure. Now, a lot played into that, and you can feel free to go back and watch the entire video if you like. But one of the biggest challenges that they had was finding the proper tooling and getting it set up and calibrated correctly. Tooling is critical in manufacturing because it ensures precision, efficiency, and consistency in production. It involves creating specialized tools like dies, molds, jigs, and fixtures that shape and assemble materials into finished products. Without good tooling, your quality is going to be garbage, and you may not be able to manufacture at all, which is what ultimately happened to Craftsman. Now, in that same interview, Tim Cook went on to address this point specifically.
The products we do require really advanced tooling. And the precision that you have to have in tooling and working with the materials that we do are state of the art. And the tooling skill is very deep here. You know, in the US, you could have a meeting of tooling engineers and I'm not sure we could fill the room. In China, you could fill multiple football fields. It's that vocational expertise is very deep. Very, very deep here.
So here's the real problem. Expertise, or vocational expertise, as Tim Cook called it. We don't have it. We don't have it in a lot of different areas that we need it. Honestly, it doesn't seem like we're all that interested in creating it. To illustrate what I mean by that, let me ask you a question. How many of you have kids or know of younger people who are going into manufacturing? What percentage of the young people that you know are going to college to become an engineer or an expert in tooling or an expert in manufacturing? While there may be some, I'm guessing that many of you don't know anyone going into a field like that. So what do young people study in school? Well, here's a graph of undergraduate degrees given by colleges in the US for the past 10 years or so. From this graph, you can clearly see that degrees in engineering and computer sciences are actually down. And here's the crazy thing. Those clips that I played earlier from Tim Cook, they aren't from a few weeks ago or a few months ago. That interview was given in 2017. That was 8 years ago. This is not new. We've known about these issues for a really long time, and we've done little to nothing about it. Our education system has failed us. Our leaders have failed us. One of the biggest problems has been the availability of student loans for college. There was essentially no limit and no review of whether or not a student would be able to pay back the loan based upon their career choices. This free flow of money caused colleges to increase their prices. In fact, here is a graph of data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics showing the inflation of college fees and tuition next to the regular inflation rate in the economy. College costs are up nearly 300% since the 70s, almost double the inflation rate for the rest of the economy. The burden of those increases is being borne by our young people who take out loans and can't pay them back, and it's shameful. It's a drag on the economy, and to make things worse, the areas of study for all these graduates are not what we need in the long term to ensure American competitiveness. Now, I personally don't think that the answer is to do away with the Department of Education altogether, but there definitely have to be changes. Colleges need to be held accountable for the value of the education that they provide. Are they actually helping their graduates succeed and get into profitable jobs, or are they laughing all the way to the bank while their alumni struggle for decades under the weight of their student loans? Perhaps we need lower interest rates on loans given for certain degrees, or set up loan forgiveness programs for certain degrees or jobs, similar to what may already be in place for some nonprofits or government work. I bring up education because that is one of our biggest problems. Not our only problem, but one of our biggest. Our education system is not currently built to train our young people for the jobs of the future. There's a huge lack of engineering, math, and technical skills in our current workforce, and if we're going to compete against China and the rest of the world, we need to step up our game. So education is a huge part of it, but it is only one piece. Next is things like government incentives. Now, the government does have some programs to give loans to companies that are on the cutting edge. For example, the government just gave a huge $6.5 billion loan to Rivian, which is a company that manufactures electric vehicles. Now, you may say, now don't we have a deficit issue and don't we need to stop spending on things like that? Well, yes, we do have significant deficit challenges and we absolutely need to deal with it. But big investments like these pay off. First of all, they're loans and they're going to be paid back. Secondly, they create jobs and support American manufacturing and technology. These kinds of loans allow companies like Rivian to compete with Chinese firms and other firms from overseas, and there are very few investors who can afford to put up $6 billion to any company. Next, we need to change our focus. We will never be able to compete with China on certain things like low-value items. The fact that they make a lot of toys or clothes isn't really a huge concern for us. We should focus on high-value, technologically advanced manufacturing. These are things like microchips and electric vehicles. These are areas where we could leverage automation and efficiency. That said, there are still going to be some areas where we're going to have difficulty competing. And this is where we need reliable partners. We need allies like Canada and Mexico and Europe with whom we can trade for lower value parts or raw materials. We need to diversify our supply chain and bring things closer to home so that we can withstand disruptions like another COVID or a ship getting trapped in the Suez Canal. We need to stop antagonizing our friends and start working together. The big threat here is China, not Canada or Mexico. Now that brings me to tariffs. Tariffs have their place. We may need to add tariffs to things like microchips or electric vehicles or solar panels, but we need to be strategic about how we do it. And I'm afraid that what we've seen recently is not strategic at all, and it's doing far more damage than good. There's a quote from Teddy Roosevelt that I love. It was in the early 1900s, and he had modernized the US naval fleet, painted it bright white, and sailed it all around the world as a show of American might. His famous saying was, "Talk softly, but carry a big stick." It seems like right now we're screaming at the top of our lungs about how big our stick is, but the truth is it's not as big as it used to be. This is a national crisis, and it's worse than you think it is. We are quickly losing dominance in multiple key fields, and we need to be unified and focused on fixing this problem and not taking actions that make it worse. There's a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist out there named Thomas Friedman who has been studying and reporting on and traveling to China for decades. He was recently interviewed by Ezra Klein, and this is what he said specifically on Chinese innovation and electric vehicles.
I came to China after COVID. I said, wow, when I was last here, Xiaomi was a phone company. I came back, they were a car company. When I was here last, Huawei was a phone company. It came back, they were a car company. So China realized it could not compete with combustion vehicles with America. And so basically they put their cell phones on wheels. It is a seamless digital experience from the rest of your life. It is just so far ahead of anything I've seen here.
It used to be that China was the workshop and the US was the center of innovation. We would come up with the ideas and China would build them. That isn't true anymore. They have the expertise, capacity, factories, people, and they're now innovating on their own. To meet this challenge, we need to be unified. We can't afford to get distracted. We need to work together in our own borders, within our own country, but also with our allies to shore up our supply chains. We need to revolutionize our education system and focus on the jobs of the future. We need to invest in innovative companies and industries that will bring about